A Korean War surgeon saved lives without ever attending medical school, and nobody caught him until after the war ended. In 1951, the USS Ground was in active combat waters off the Korean peninsula when a ship's surgeon named Joseph Sear performed emergency procedures that, by all accounts, kept wounded sailors alive. The problem? Joseph Sear didn't exist. He was Ferdinand Demara Jr., a man with no medical credentials whatsoever, operating under a stolen identity. And this wasn't his first life or his last. Now, before we credit Demara as some kind of Robin Hood figure, let's pump the brakes. Yes, those sailors recovered. But let's trace this back to where it actually started, because the real story isn't about competence. It's about audacity meeting a system with almost no safeguards. Ferdinand Demara was born in 1921 in Lawrence, Massachusetts. By his early 20s, he'd already started his pattern. Enlist in the Navy, go AWOL, disappear, resurface under a new name in a new profession. The man had an almost supernatural ability to walk into an institution, absorb its language and protocols, and vanish before anyone asked too many questions. His first major reinvention came in the late 1940s. Demara became a Trappist monk. Not ordained, not trained, he simply joined a monastery in Kentucky and lived as a monk for 18 months. He wasn't just pretending to pray, he was genuinely committed to the role. He read the liturgy. He maintained the silence. He belonged, or seemed to. But monastic life was too quiet for Demara. He craved something bigger, something with stakes. So he left and reinvented himself again, this time as a college professor. He taught psychology and religion at a small Maine college under a borrowed doctorate. His students said he was brilliant. Some even said he changed their lives. Here's where the skepticism kicks in. We want to believe Demara was simply gifted, that he possessed some rare intellectual capacity that transcended credentials. But let's be honest, he wasn't teaching nuclear physics. He taught humanities, where subjective expertise is harder to verify. He exploited a blind spot, not a superpower. Then came the Navy again. Demara enlisted once more, but this time under the identity of Joseph Sear, a real person whose credentials he'd stolen. He reported to the USS Ground as a medical officer. No medical school, no internship, no board certification. Just confidence and a file full of forged documents. And here's the counterargument we need to address. Didn't he actually perform surgery successfully? Didn't he save lives? The evidence suggests yes, he did. But survival isn't the same as competence. Luck, basic anatomy knowledge from stolen textbooks, and the fact that combat medicine often comes down to stopping bleeding and preventing infection, these factors don't prove qualification. The surgery story got out. A real doctor, Joseph Sear, the man whose identity Demara had stolen, read about himself performing these heroic operations and contacted the Navy. Demara was discovered, court-martialed, and discharged. But again, he walked away. No prison time, no serious consequences. What happened next? Demara did it again. He became a prison warden in Washington state, then a cancer researcher, then a chaplain, then a teacher in a Canadian school. Each identity was more elaborate than the last, each deception more brazen. The pattern reveals something crucial about institutional failure. These weren't small, unsophisticated organizations. They were major institutions, universities, hospitals, the military itself. And yet Demara walked through them like they were made of paper. Why? Because in the 1940s and 50s, verification systems barely existed. No background checks. No credential verification. No cross-institutional databases. A well-forged document and a convincing demeanor were enough. Demara understood this vulnerability before most people even knew it existed. He was, in a sense, a pioneer of institutional manipulation. But let's not mistake audacity for brilliance. Demara wasn't a mastermind in the way we typically use that term. He didn't have a grand plan. He was a drifter with a specific psychological need. To belong, to matter, to be someone other than Ferdinand Demara Jr. Each identity was an escape route, not a scheme. His Canadian school career ended when a former acquaintance recognized him and reported his real identity to authorities. Demara was deported back to the United States. And even then, he wasn't prosecuted for most of his crimes. He served time only for the military impersonation. After his release, Demara became a Benedictine monk, legitimately this time. He worked as a hospital orderly and counselor. He lived quietly in a monastery for decades, finally becoming the person he'd always pretended to be, without the pretense. Some might call it redemption. Others would call it the only identity that actually stuck because it required no deception. The Demara case exposes something most people don't want to admit. Credentials are only as strong as the systems verifying them. He succeeded not because he was exceptionally talented, but because institutions trusted documents more than they investigated people. That vulnerability still exists today, it's just evolved. Demara died in 1982, largely forgotten except by historians and fraud researchers. His story wasn't about one brilliant con, it was about a systematic weakness that allowed one desperate man to become a dozen different people, each one more convincing than the last, until the system finally caught up. Subscribe for the next deep dive into how ordinary people exploited the systems we trust, because understanding the mechanics of deception is the best defense against becoming the next victim.